Hello and welcome to this WineGB webinar on routes to market, selling to distribution and the on-trade. I would just very quickly like to introduce our three speakers for this evening. But before I do that, I'd just like to remind you that this is being recorded and will be available on the WineGB website, and that there will be a Q&A session, and to ask questions, you go down to the bottom of your screen and use the Q&A icon. So our speakers this evening are Simon Thorpe, Andrew Bewes and Rupert Pritchard, and I will let them introduce themselves. Simon Thorpe is chairing for this evening, so I will hand over to him now and disappear into the background.
Well, thanks very much, Jo, and good evening, everybody. Hello. So just one line about me. Some people might know me, some might not. I'm an old timer in the wine industry now, over 30 years of experience in various different things, and particularly pertinent to this evening's session is that I, for a while, had a job at Waitrose as the buyer responsible for sourcing English and Welsh sparkling wines, and that gave me it was quite a while ago actually, and it gave me a great insight into some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that we're going to talk about tonight in terms of pricing and market approach and those sorts of things. But that was quite some time ago, and things have changed an awful lot. So the objective from today's session, this is one the middle one, in fact, of a series of three specifically about routes to market. And some of you will have attended or watched Mike Paul's session last Tuesday when he gave a very succinct and articulate session around the theory of routes to market and the different options available to wineries. If we can achieve half of his level of capability tonight, then we will have done well. But tonight's session is specifically about the choice and the practicalities of working with distributors, whether they be big or small, as the option for route to market. So it's all about the world of dealing with distributors, working with distributors. I'm conscious that we've got quite a diverse audience, and we'll aim to have content here which is relevant to everybody. Some might be more relevant to some and others to others, but there should be something for everybody, no matter how well established they are. And the format is we've got an hour-long session. It's a sort of question time format. I fulfilled the role of Fiona Bruce. I'm slightly shorter, slightly wider, and I don't have quite such scary eyebrows. So please forgive me for that. But we do want you to send in questions if you can. There's, as Jo said, there's the Q&A, and it would be really good to have them. If there's anything particularly pertinent, then we might try and answer it in the middle of the session. If it's otherwise, we'll look at them at the end. We'll set some time aside at the end, and if there's anything which needs any further content, then we'll probably take it away and publish it later as an answer. I'm going to talk, or Rupert and Andrew are going to introduce themselves in a minute, but I wanted first of all to give a kind of brief, very top-line view of the UK market, not how it's doing, but more how it's structured, because I think it's quite useful in some respects for us to have some context in which we work here as a wine industry. Mike gave a brilliant outline for the options that are available in the market, and obviously, we're not going to go into all of those, but I guess the intent here is to look at, we have to look at the time when you as a winery or a winery operation has decided that it can't sell all the wine that it wants to itself, and therefore it needs to use a third party, needs to outsource some of its sales and marketing function. The UK certainly, as a marketplace, benefits from a simplicity and a freedom. As long as you comply to the legal requirements on quality and labelling, and you've got a license to sell, then effectively you can sell to whomever you want. There are no barriers. You can sell to a consumer, you can sell to a retailer, you can sell to a restaurant. And if you contrast that freedom, if you contrast that with certain other markets, then we luxuriate in that freedom. In the States, you have the complicated 3-tier system. It's different in different states. It's very complex, and you can't just go and do what you want to do. So that's a real benefit. What that freedom does also deliver is an awful lot of competition. So within the marketplace, this market is undoubtedly renowned still around the world for probably having the broadest range of different wines from different origins, and that makes everybody's life quite difficult. It's also that complexity and that multiplicity of choice is made better / worse, depending on your take, by a trade which is extremely passionate and knowledgeable about wine, and we are very, very lucky, and a commentator base, the journalists are also the same, and this makes it even kind of more challenging and competitive, I guess. And also we have, in general, consumers who are very happy to be guided, and also generally very happy to experiment in their wine choices. So these are good things. On the flip side, they can be difficult. So the choices that really are facing the winery are either sell it yourself, sell it or online, and all the benefits that gives to you. That's control of your margins, full margin, it's control of your communication, it's control of your relationship with your customers. And then really, once you're beyond that phase, and once you need to think, all right, well, I got too much wine and I need to find a new route to market or a greater distribution, that's when the difficult things start, because not only have you got to find the right distribution partners, the right route to market, but you've also got to have developed a fairly well thought out sales plan. I don't think that Rupert or Andrew would be too forgiving if someone came to them and said, oh, I've got all this wine, what shall I do with it? Can you help me? And without any thought about how to actually do that initial step, what you want to achieve both in the near term and the long term, what your brand is, and all those thought processes there. And Mike was very clear last week in that he used that old adage around polishing or sharpening your axe for 4 hours before you start chopping down the tree. And I think that's really, really vital to do that planning ahead of any approach or to marketplace. Not that it can't be adjusted or amended with the distributor, depending on the circumstance, but I do think that you've got to have a clear plan. And so once you've gone through that process of thinking, then you need to start to talk to people like Rupert or Andrew. And I'm going to ask them actually at this stage to give us a 2-minute elevator pitch for who they are and what their businesses do. And then you'll see that we've gone for a panel of one who is a local. Rupert is a local, small, geographically operation, and at Taurus Wines, and Andrew Buse at Hallgarten is one of the national distributors, so covering the whole country. So can I ask you, Rupert, can you go first? Give us 2 minutes on Taurus.
Right. Well, my name's Rupert Pritchett. In 2001, I founded Taurus Wines, initially in a cowshed on a farm in the Surrey Hills. And then about 3 years ago, we were able to successfully crowdfund into a fantastic new barn, which you can probably see in the background behind me. So we feel very spoilt at the moment. Being in the Surrey Hills, we are in the heart of the commuter belt. So we get in the days when people did have to go to London to work rather than work from home. We had a lot of the wealthier commuters. And we're very spoilt with a very high average spend of just north of £200 per customer. So people tend to be buying from us by the case. We do, alongside that, we do a little bit of wholesale, but we are primarily a retail operation.
And what's your customer base generally like? What's the breadth?
I'd say the average age of our customers is probably in their 50s. And they tend to start in their late 20s. We do quite a lot of wedding and party and events work, and that tends to be with the first time we come into contact with our customers in terms of age, and then we try and keep them on all the way through for the rest of their life. So there's a start in their late 20s, early 30s, and then mostly they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s.
And you also have a wholesale customer base as well?
We do. We supply 8 other stores. These tend to be things like farm shops and sometimes village stores and things like that. And we supply a couple of high-end pub restaurants who are very good brand ambassadors for us.
Cool. Okay. And different to that then, Andrew, how about Hallgarten?
Very different to that. So 100 views. I'm challenging, possibly even beating Simon in terms of longevity in the trade, coming up towards 40 years. Been with Hallgarten for 11. Hallgarten is, I guess, one of the larger wine only. In other words, we don't sell anything other than wines, sparkling wines. Don't do any spirits or beers, etc. And we have a range just over 1,000 wines, which is relatively modest compared to some of the competitors, selling to pretty well everyone bar the trade. We're slightly old-fashioned, which is rather like me, I guess. We will not compete with our customer base. So our customer base is 70% on-trade, and the rest is split between independent, retail, and the national operators. So a lot of orchestration in terms of range management to make sure that sort of works smoothly. It's always work in progress. So when we deal with the major supermarkets, we tend to operate on exclusive labels that don't compete with or clash with the wines which we sell into restaurants and the independents. And largely we feel that the independents and the restaurants can coexist using the same range, so long as we do our job in terms of managing pricing as best we can against the backdrop of price management not being very legal. So that's really what we do. We work with 180 odd suppliers, of which probably 20 are significant and 10 are very significant. So we'll do the full sales and marketing job for them, and effectively for those people we largely work on an exclusive basis. So any bottle of wine coming from, say, Frescobaldi in the UK, no matter where you buy it, has to go through us. And that's about it really. We've got 40 people on the road. I'm quite slightly wondering whether to call it talk about everything in the past tense, because clearly for the last 3 months 70% of our business has been reduced to zero, but it is, I'm glad to say, recovering it now. So really, anything else you'd like to know at this stage?
Yes, I want to know what the commuter belt is actually going to be called from now on. Actually, it might be, you're going to have an elevator pitch or equipment. So within your two structures, how do you, who manages the relationship with your suppliers? So if, as an English winery, who would they be talking to in your different businesses? Rupert?
Well, within my business, because frankly, I'd love to buy everything, but I couldn't do it justice and spend enough time in each region. I delegate areas to members of staff who are particularly keen or interested in that area. So in the case of England, Callum, one of my colleagues, he looks after the English wine buying. And that means that he can devote more time to reading up on English wine and understanding the vintages and the suppliers and things, because otherwise there simply aren't enough time in the day. So he will select a range. Quite often that involves bringing samples to the store or someone coming in. And then we'll debate whether or not there is a place for that wine in the range. So if there's a similar product already at the similar price, it would have to be significantly better or some reason to swap it out. Because unfortunately, shelf space isn't infinite, and we're at the stage of one in, one out. So something has to be better than what's already on there. Otherwise, you can't just take it on.
Okay, cool. And Andrew?
Much the same, but just on a bigger scale, I guess. Quite a bit of my overhead is spent on managing suppliers and seeking the new and the wonderful. So I have a buying team, which is headed up by Steve Daniel, who was Oddbin's an aspiring partner of yours back in the day, Simon. So they will pre-select, and then we have a panel which includes the sales side of the business to really go through the same process that Rupert goes through. We are constantly turning down opportunity, and it is largely a one in, one out basis. We tend to look, because of the complexity of shipping from around the world, we do tend to look at producers rather than individual wines when we're looking at overall relationship, just to make sure there's quantum mass with producers. But that said, we do have several producers where we're only bringing one wine in because it's so spectacular. But so there are various things we have to take into account. No, it is a tough job turning down an awful lot of very good wine. But we have to limit that and see a commercial route through.
And then, just on top of that, so what's the existing, if you can explain to everybody what your existing English range is?
At Hallgarden?
Yeah.
Yes. That's relatively brief. We work with a few wineries. It started fairly small, and I guess one of the encouraging things we've seen is, if you go back 5-10 years, it was very much restaurants wanting local wines or not wanting them at all. So our Sussex restaurant base were fairly well catered for, and that probably goes up into London. But getting Yorkshire to consider anything that's not anything from another part of England is much harder than considering bringing something in from France, Spain, or even Greece. So that's developed on, but we started really with sparkling wine. So we work with Subre and the Goring Estate and Bolney, Osbrook, so that's all down in Sussex, and Newhall in Essex. And then we've just started with Blackbrook Winery in London, which is an interesting dynamic. So in many ways, not very geographically representative. It'd be unthinkable to have such a limited geography if you're looking at France or Italy, but the range is developing, and we certainly see some opportunity there.
Cool. And Rupert?
We've got a range of 10 English still wines and 10 English sparkling wines at the moment. We are seeing enormous growth in England. Just did the sums this morning. Over a 12-month period, we're up about 450%. So, that will probably keep increasing in the future. Obviously, part of the factor of that great growth was the 2018 vintage, which made it very easy to sell, because being an independent, you can explain the difference between good vintages and ones that are perhaps a bit harder to put together. But it does seem to be there's getting genuine traction in the wine, and we're responsive enough that if a region becomes popular, we can allocate it more shelf space very easily.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Right. So so as I said at the top, the key thing here is to try and get to be able to describe best practice, I guess, in terms of interrelationships between a supplying winery and their distribution partners. So I want to try and tease out from the guys what makes a good distributor and what makes a good supplier. So this is and we might kind of revisit some of the themes that come up here, but I'm going to do the distributor bit first. And ask you two what you think. What is it that you aspire to in order to be successful in what you do, and therefore what might be attractive to a supplying winery when they're making their choices? So you go first, Rupert.
Well, consistent quality is obviously almost a given. And by that, I mean, it's great if you've got a wine that's terrific one vintage, but if it's not so good the next, customers aren't that great at learning the difference between vintages. I know it's our job, but they will come in and say, can I have what I had last time? And if you know that there's a winery who will consistently put a good product out there, that's always a major plus. Otherwise, flexibility, that was particularly noticeable during COVID. A lot of people reduced their minimum order, which made our lives a lot easier. Efficiency, you'd be amazed how many wineries I'm still chasing for invoices, sometimes a couple of weeks after delivery. It's not difficult. We can send out an invoice within 3 minutes of somebody ordering over the phone. I'm sure a supplier can. And the other is very simple. It's just all about communication. So if a wine is about to run out or about to change vintage or has gone into the local supermarket around the corner, let us know and we can adapt accordingly. We're not going to throw all our toys out of the pram. As long as we can price match, being in a competitor's store isn't a problem. You know, people are always quite worried about us saying, oh, we didn't want you to know it was in the supermarket. It's like, I don't mind as long as we can be competitive. So it's just basically open, honest communication and efficiency.
Okay, good.
I'd echo all of that, really. It's actually interesting hearing it from Rupert, because it's like a combination of what we expect from a winery and what our customers expect from us. So it all rings true. Open and honest, speed of communication, accuracy of communication, and getting the basics right is so fundamental. So product information, etc., has to be on the nail, really, because our machine depends upon it, but also the customers that we supply very often need that sort of information in advance. My big bugbear has always been advance notification of change of vintage and managing that. And if they say we've got 50 cases of something, it needs to bloody be there. So, all too often, it won't be there until you really drum that into people. So the management of reserves and management of vintage is desperately important. And there are some very big examples of wineries in England not doing that very well and running out of stock at key times of the year. And the one thing that dominates my life is the continuity, which Rupert mentioned, the continuity required by restaurants particularly. That is pretty essential. If you run out of a wine at their key time of selling, November, December, then that's the end of a beautiful relationship, which is not good enough.
So Andrew, when you've got when you are organising your plans with your suppliers for the year, do you give them a volume forecast?
We do. Yes. I'm sort of slightly laughing because it's one of those impossibilities, particularly at the moment, and it's very topical right at this second with what's gone on the last few months. But yes, we can very accurately forecast across our business, particularly across the on-trade, which is pretty consistent. We know what they want. The curveballs from our business tend to be surges from the independent sector, which can be caused by fees or getting some social media on certain wines, and that can cause a spike, which is an unpredicted spike, if you like. So that's really where it's thrown out. But yes, we will set a forecast at the beginning of the year and alongside price negotiation for the year, and then review that on a quarterly basis. But it takes people to do that. And our forecaster is and his team, his shipping team, are very adept at what they do. But it is a lot. It's a lot of work there.
Yeah. So I suppose the point I'm getting to is if you're a winery and you're looking to to develop the market, and you know, let's say you're putting a third or a half of your volume aside to sell to Andrew Buse at Hallgarten, and Andrew then is, you know, quarter of the way through the year has only taken one order, and it only represents 10% of the kind of forecast volume. Is that, you know, you have a flexibility on your side to be able to up or you know, adjust your sales processes?
We tend, well, loosely speaking, once you've set your wine list in each individual restaurant, then that is it, pretty well, come hell or high water. The old days of having wines of the week, wines of the month are less prevalent than they used to be. There's some seasonality. People will review their list, you know, probably twice a year. And obviously at the top end of the business, they're constantly reviewing, you know, there's a sommelier involved, then you know, that's their job to keep the wine list lively. But so we can't do a great deal to influence sales within restaurants. Promotions don't really work. Yes, it makes a difference if it's by the glass or not. That's the fundamental. We can influence sales into other sectors, notably the independent retail sector, through awareness, stroke promotion, stroke. You know, we can help an operator, you know, bring a wine to the fore, do some tastings, do some online activity, whatever it might be. So, but it's really relatively limited. So the reality is we would generally be going back to a winery, and you know, our forecast would be by month. So you know, they know that they won't expect many orders in January, February, March, and then it'll mount up, and then we'll stock up in, you know, during summer closures and up towards Christmas. So it won't simply be a number thing, but if it's not on plan, then we will go back to the winery and talk about it. And you know, they want to release, you know, if they want us to release some of the reserve, we'll do that. So it's, again, communication.
It's a potentially challenging side of things, I think, for especially for smaller operators who've got a small set of wines that they're selling, and especially in the early days of a relationship where you wouldn't know, nobody really knows how well this is going to be received in the broader marketplace. So it's certainly something for everybody to keep a close eye on, I think.
Yeah.
Next question really is around how you assess your supply base as well. So that the kind of what good looks like in terms of the KPIs that you set. So you know, when you take on both of you, you know, when you take on a new supplier, whether that be English, Welsh, or from wherever, how would do you set expectations, and then you know, you review obviously the forecast against the forecast. But is there any other sets of KPIs that you look at from an assessment point of view, Rupert?
One thing is, our customers are already asking for it. So there are a couple of wineries, I think, for instance, Campbell Valley and Nightimber, who would be strong examples of this, where customers regularly come in and say, do you do this wine? And I'm close enough to the shop floor to know what's already in demand. Whereas there's other wineries that we would take on, which perhaps we like an English Chardonnay from Kent or something, but customers around here aren't necessarily au fait with it until we explain it to them. So one thing is there already a pre-existing demand? The other is obviously high quality product, but with that, high quality packaging. I think a prime example of that was Nightimber a few years ago when they did their wonderful label upgrade. We had some identical stock. Some was in the old label, some was in the new label. We had the old label with £5 a bottle off. We could not shift it for love nor money. And we left it as an experiment in the end. And customers look all awkward and they go, oh, it's for a gift, I would, but I know you're talking sense, but, and so on and so forth. People love things that look lovely. And that's part of the independent experience. They've come in here for a nice gift or for something, and they're drinking with their eyes to an extent. So it's got to taste good, look good, and be at the right price.
Interesting. I think that's trickling over to the on-trade as well, which it tends to be the first time you saw the label was when you got the bottle that you'd ordered, whereas certainly the casual dining sector have moved much more to visual display, and that visual element can actually help sell, which is good. So I'm absolutely behind that call for high quality packaging.
And what other KPIs, Andrew, particularly, have you got?
Well, it would be all too easy to have a set of very serious KPIs of a business of our size. Just as the multiples do, and look at sort of pounds per square inch, if you like, of shelf space. Yes, we do analyse our range each year in a very meticulous way, looking for justification, and we do vary from wines which are brought in for one customer through to wines which might be in 2,000 outlets, if you like. So we have to sort of cope with a sort of a variety of different circumstances. So it's not so easy comparing one wine with another. But very broadly, we're looking at a range of wines. We will have an expectation of what sales should look like at that sort of price range, just as I'm sure you would have done at Waitrose in the retail environment. And so I think when you've got a commercial range in front of you, you can be fairly strict about it. So if we're looking at changing our Chilean supplier, let's say, and that's not condemning Chile to just having commercial wines in any way, shape, or form, but we know what a Chilean Pinot Noir should be doing for us, and same as Sauvignon Blanc or a Merlot at different price points. I think where we have to, and everyone has to sort of throw the rule book out, is where you get something that you're really passionate about. So you taste a range of wines, or a wine even, that you just think this is great, and I think there is a danger, and it's quite relevant at the moment. There's a danger of people reducing down to the lowest common denominator, where actually we need retailers and restaurateurs able to or willing to stick their necks out and say, I love that wine. I know nobody knows about it, but I'm going to give it a go. And that's the sort of, there'll be an element of Rupert's custom base will come in looking for that excitement, just as there's an element who come in saying, I want that Chardonnay that I love. And that's really what keeps us all working in it, I think. So yes, there are rules, and yes, if you're in the sparkling wine category, so many English producers are, then increasingly, you have to be able to work with a company like us, or even Rupert's at that end of the market. It's got to perform. So yes, there will be some criteria there, and it will be the balance of price and quality and consistency and packaging, and there is an X factor as well with some things. Night Timber certainly has an X factor at the moment because it's caught people's imagination.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So the choices confronting a winery that wants to outsource some of its sales and marketing function, or sales commercial function, are really and a little bit obviously will depend upon the volume available, because I don't know, Andrew, you would certainly have a minimum sort of level of requirement, I guess, wouldn't you? I don't know what the smallest supplier that you would have would be.
The smallest supplier, no, you would be surprised that we do ship tiny quantities from different producers from around the world. I mean, whether that's a simple supply situation, Cote Rôtie, say, we work with some top players who just don't have very much volume. And frankly, we can't sell very much of it, so at those prices. But no, I mean, yes, but if it comes into that commercial range, so a wine sitting at 10 quid retail, we will have an expectation of what that wine should deliver in terms of profit and margins, and what it should deliver for the producer and for us in terms of volume. So if there isn't enough wine, then clearly it's either wrongly or incorrectly priced, or they just selling it all elsewhere. So that is a key question, certainly.
But there wouldn't necessarily, volume wouldn't necessarily stop you from considering a really smart boutique winery from the UK, from England.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it wouldn't. It really wouldn't. No, and I think as a business we have moved from a scattergun approach. We bring in a new wine and we throw it at everyone, all our whole sales team and our whole customer base. And now I think we're a lot we have become a lot more canny now. So targeting wines of a certain price or style to a customer base that sits that. And actually within our own sales team, we've probably got, of our 40 people, we've probably got a dozen who are very adept at selling in through sommeliers into London and around the country. And they will be selling tiny parcels of this, that and the other, as well as being expected to sell quite a lot of commercial wine as well. So it's horses for courses from that point of view.
But if you got an allocation of say 50 cases of a specific wine, you would go out to the sales team and say, look, where can you place? Because it's not going to last all year, presumably, if it's popular.
No, we would probably talk to the sales team before we took the 50 cases, but yes, and we would see that as going into a certain number of restaurants. We might look for an exclusive arrangement with a customer. So there are a variety of different routes we can take. Yeah.
And presumably, Rupert, that's you quite like the idea of having small parcels that you can hand sell.
Yeah, sometimes the fear of missing out that comes with a small parcel all helps the sale. So, for instance, there's a local rosé from Albury Vineyard that we've been selling for the last 8 years, and they don't make a lot of it. And we're told what our allocation is each year, and it typically lasts 2 or 3 months. And then after that, you sadly have some disappointed customers, but you put them all on a waiting list for the following year. The second it comes in, give them all a call, and you've sold half of it in the first day, which is marvelous for cash flow.
Yeah.
And it also it creates a hype, and people who would probably ordinarily have bought a bottle and then come back and bought a case, if they liked it, will come in and grab a case because they don't want to miss out.
Yeah.
So it's sort of an
unwitting,
the conversations about. Sorry.
No, go on.
Sorry. It just means the conversation is about how much can I have rather than price. But over to Andrew.
Yeah.
No, I'm just going to echo that because actually, interestingly, I think we look at our market in 2 ways. People who are making wine-led decisions, and that would include every independent retailer and every sommelier and a swathe of very engaged owner-operator stroke front of house heads. So they're making active wine decisions, and they understand that in some cases there may be a limited availability in retail. That adds excitement, and there's plenty of other wines to put in the slot when it's not available. For the rest of the business, the restaurant side, they want continuity above all else, and so a parcel that's going to run out too quickly will really not be of interest to them. And we can put some wine into reserve, but it's essentially that end of the market is limited, as far as we're concerned, in the on-trade, to the top end of the on-trade, who have the ability to hand sell. And that's what binds independents and top restaurants together, is that they have someone front of house able to help make sales, make customers help customers make decisions.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Right now, so the next piece of this, really, what we need to try and exit from without either of you two getting arrested. We're going to talk about pricing and margin requirements and those sorts of things, and whether exclusivity plays into this at all, and how it all works for you, because with the best will in the world, despite the passionate buying fraternity or a collective that there is in the marketplace, which is one of the special things about our industry, still it's a commercial world. So wines propositions are going to be more successful when they're more commercially attractive for it. So I'm going to ask the nuts and bolts of margin requirements from the two of you, but also what the pitfalls are for where, especially with regards to English and Welsh wine, where you've got a market where potentially you're competing against your supplier here. So you go first, Andrew, and then you, Rupert.
Okay. I guess this falls into two categories, or two sides. Firstly, English and Welsh wineries are in an almost unique position, or a very new position now, because we're an island nation and we've always had this sort of strip of water around us, which meant that we dealt with an imported product, which created a reasonable amount of clarity. The people importing were able to be seen very clearly. So suddenly becoming a wine producing nation, it's probably the wrong word, but we have become a wine producing nation. It's beyond a hobby now. It's a very, very serious wines and some very serious product, and a lot of people invested in it. So in the past, I guess, someone like us, as an importer, or even on a smaller scale, any importer would effectively set the pricing. And where you're a wine producing nation, suddenly you've got a producer setting the pricing, which really means it's beholden on the producer to fully understand the margin requirements. So the question is absolutely valid. I don't mind in this forum just detailing roughly how we would work. So if you look at my duty paid product that sits in our warehouse at a duty paid cost price, that's very similar to sitting in an English winery, let's say, at a duty paid cost. For us to make all the margins work through our system, we probably have to set a retail price, which is again in a grey area, but we would have to calculate a retail price which would roughly be a 48 to 50% margin from that cost price. Now that would be relevant if we were selling to the public. We're not. What we're trying to do there is create a pricing matrix that would allow, say, Rupert to buy something from me and make the margin that he requires, possibly even me selling on to another wholesaler and to make the margin that they require, and with us making some money at the other end, hopefully. To run our business, a distribution business, very roughly costs 21%, and that's where. And I've worked for 3 very major distributors over my years, and it's been pretty well 21% since the start. So if we make 25%, we will make a 4% net profit, which is fairly aspirational in wine distribution terms. There aren't many making 4% margin. That's roughly where it is, and so Rupert can talk more about what a retailer might need to make his work. But we work on the assumption that Rupert and other leading independent players would need a margin of somewhere between 30 and 35%, depending on whether they're price matching or it's on promotion, whatever it might be. So we work on somewhere in the middle there, about 33%. Offer more margin if it's a bulk purchase, if you like, ordering by the pallet. As Rupert alluded to, actually more recently, it's more been about convenience, topping up orders, fairly relaxed, looking at minimum orders. Restaurants are making, in London, some making as much as 80% at the top end of the market, but we still work on a margin of about 72% on average. Outside London, it comes lower. It depends on where it is, but 72 to 75% is a regional supposition for most restaurants. So we have to play with all of that within our pricing matrix to make sure that we come out making some money. So that's, unless there's anything specific, I think that's probably all I would say at the moment on that side.
I think the key is that for it to work, you have to be able to hit those margins, because otherwise you as a management team and your sales team who are selling, they're going to be less predisposed to be selling something where they're making a lower margin or a suboptimal margin.
Yes. Yeah, the most likely pothole, I guess, at the moment is an English-Welsh producer setting up and setting what they might consider to be a fair price to charge someone when they come and buy a case of wine at the winery door, or even when they go and sell it to a restaurant locally. And they're probably there has been occasion where they've vastly underestimated what the margins that are needed across the business. So that's the sort of counterintuitive bit, I guess, for a new producer to actually work at a margin of say 50%. As being normal, because it is counterintuitive to all. It sounds like an enormous margin to most of us, but actually you need to be around that to then say to a retailer 50 miles away, yes, we can offer you a full retail margin, or same to a wholesaler. So that's the pothole for my side.
Okay, Rupert.
I would very much agree with Andrew. I know sometimes happen to know somebody who's an antiques dealer, and one of his catchphrases is always leave something in it for the next man. So always leave it so that somebody else can have a bit of margin along the line. Any retailer, whether it's in books or cameras or wine, broadly speaking, needs to make about 30% to cover their rent rates and other overheads. And it's because running a retail shop is an expensive game. We've got a couple of vans, 7 staff, all that sort of thing. It means our overheads run at rather a spooky £1,000 a day. And it means that if a winery wants to use us as a route to market, they have to pay for that. Because fundamentally, if they don't, we won't be here tomorrow. Which means we need to make at least 30%, probably just to wash our face, probably 35% to make a margin. On imported wine, we're making 40. As Andrew says, from UK agents, they all tend to, for a smaller amount of a specific item, we'd make 30. But chances are, with some good buying, you'd be making 35 on almost everything, whether it's because there's a multi-buy on it or you're just being careful with what you've bought. So realistically, a winery needs to be able to allow us about 35%. Following what from Andrew was saying about people going direct, one of the other big pitfalls that we've had is a lot of wineries selling direct are able to benefit from the 4% VAT regime for agricultural goods. So the cellar doors, even if their ex-VAT price is similar to what they're selling to us, appear an awful lot cheaper.
Yeah. Okay, I'm conscious of time actually, and I've got a couple of other things to go through. I think there's some great content there. Thank you. Very, very insightful. Talking specifically about English and Welsh wines now, I'd really like to get a view from you two about the opportunities that there is, and this sort of sentiment that you have from your customers, whether they be, Rupert, your wedding planners, or Andrew, sommelier. So there seems to be an awful lot of positivity around English and Welsh wine. Great wine. English Wine Week was extremely well covered and well received. And it's nice as an industry to have something local that we can champion. I think there's a lot of people that would sense that and be feeling in a similar way. Is that kind of flowing through into the discussions that you have with your customers, Andrew?
Yes, I think it is. It's been very interesting. I think it's almost a given now on the sparkling side, and we've definitely seen a move away from having a cheap entry-level champagne and bringing in an English sparkling wine there in that slot, and it's not comparing pricing, and then having a Grand Marque or Grower above that. So that's relatively easy, and there's a lot of vying over where Prosecco sits and where English wine or English sparkling wine and champagne all sit relative to each other. But there's a limited number of slots on most restaurant lists, so we're seeing that. And on the still wine, less so. That's I'm afraid on one level is a slight. We're still seeing it. It's a bit of a victim of the consolidation that we're seeing on wine lists, and some of that's very positive. So instead of listing by country and by region, we tend to have gone to lists which are mixing, by sort of merchandising by style, if you like, and that means there's only 3 red wine slots at this sort of price level, and that's where it becomes quite difficult for someone who's not in either must-have or the mainstream to knock on the door, and that's just as tough for quality end of Greece, Australia, wherever it might be. So the English and Welsh are in the same boat there. So the local ticket does help, undoubtedly. But I think it's moving at pace, and there's no doubt that this is here to stay. I think Brexit gives another, the Buy British movement is not just a thing, a fad. It is very serious. So I can't see any reason. It's there for us to lose the opportunity rather than, the opportunity is there, no doubt.
Good, excellent. And Rupert, what's the sentiment on your side?
Well, certainly the younger wedding customers, when they all come in with their aspirational hit list of what they'd like at their wedding, before the realities of budget strike, they almost always open with, "Oh, we'd love English sparkling wine." So, there is the love there. They may not be able to afford it, and then they end up with something a bit cheaper, but that's the aspiration's there. And similarly, if we're doing anything on social media and we mention an English sparkling wine, or English still wine even, you can see a huge uptake in interaction with it in a positive way. So there's definitely a lot of love out there. Equally, even on the limited number of wine lists that we do for restaurants and things, people are feeling almost compelled to have a local wine or two on there, and it's because the customers are asking for them. So there's definitely a building positivity from customers about the whole thing. The other, positive for in terms of opportunity for English winemakers with Brexit is Sterling is clearly going to keep back weaker and keep doing so, which can only make them more competitive on an export market.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, I think the other thing which we haven't mentioned is wine tourism, and amongst the sort of social media fraternity, I think there's quite a bit of crossover with wine tourists. And if you look at how many people visit South Africa for wine tourism, the increasing numbers into Spain and Portugal, up in the Douro, and of course Italy and France, a lot of those won't be going abroad this year. Now, it's not that easy just to suddenly become a destination winery, but people are fascinated by wineries, so I think there is an opportunity there. Whether it's possible to really zero in on that in a short space of time, because facilities are needed. It's not just a matter of opening the door. So, but I think long term that there's a really interesting area, and working with local establishments, local restaurants, local hotels, to maybe give special tours or whatever it might be. People don't expect necessarily to be wowed by the facilities, but just having an insight into how a winery works and what's happening is a really genuinely interesting thing and it's unique. We can't. We've never been able.
But also, beyond that, for your 40 sales team to go and visit one of your suppliers by jumping on a train or just hopping in their car rather than having to get on an aeroplane is quite an attractive proposition, isn't it?
Well, and even for them, and they've all been to wineries around the world. They're very fortunate, but even for them, who are in the trade and long in the tooth, they find it fascinating. And actually, so it is definitely something there which is interesting for consumers and for the trade. So we should definitely be using it as much as we can.
Yeah.
And some of the bigger players obviously set up for that, but I think it's something as a smaller producer or an embryonic producer you shouldn't ignore, definitely.
Well, and also, I think there's an understanding that it might not be a visit which is hugely polished and a silver service or whatever, but actually just to go and see the place and what makes the proposition what it is and special and differentiated is always important, because those things sit in a salesperson's head and they can then convey them to their customers.
Yeah, no, I still remember the first one I went to, and that's 40 years ago. So.
Right. So, sorry, Rupert, go on.
No, I was going to say, never underestimate the power of an anecdote to sell a wine. I went to this winery and fell over the dog or whatever. It's what people buy as much as the contents of the bottle itself.
Yeah, I think it's very powerful, and that's a real asset to the to the English Welsh wine industries. I think absolutely. I've got a very quick question. See if you can do a 30-second answer on this each before we do. There's a couple of questions, I think, but what and we've done extremely well not to talk about coronavirus in the last hour, which I'm grateful to you for. But I think it is kind of relevant to understand how it might have changed your kind of strategy or your strategic thinking about how you as businesses are behaving. Is there anything specifically relevant to the UK English Welsh wine industries on this? Rupert, have you got something?
Only as much that all the way down the food chain, like I mentioned earlier, I was trying to put in smaller, more regular orders with our UK suppliers. Equally, our trade customers wanted to do the same. I think everybody in the supply chain wants to hold minimal stock. And how that's relevant to an English wine supplier is, say you've got a farm shop. In normal times, they may want to order 60 bottles at a time and buy them direct from a winery. But during uncertain times, mainly want to make up a mixed case or 2 or 3 mixed cases, which they could do from us and buy just 2 bottles of a particular wine and put that there. So we allowing them a route to market when people are trying to trim exposure and costs to the books.
Yeah. Andrew?
I'm just trying to think of anything relevant. I actually think we're probably talking on a forum that is relevant to everyone. You know, anyone can broadcast and do this sort of thing. So I think whereas trying to get people to your winery in, let's say, Yorkshire or Wales or even Sussex or Kent, which we all consider to be more accessible because we're so London-centric, this makes it attainable. So I think you use the technology we have to the best advantage you can, because you can make your winery and your wines accessible through a bit of clever or use of technology.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Right. I think we've kind of covered the majority of the content. Hopefully, it's been insightful for the audience. I think you know what's clear in terms of both of you and your requirements or best practice of dealing with you guys or working with you is a consistency. Both in terms of supply and packaging and volume reserves and also the dialogue and openness in the dialogue, which I think is really important. You know, things go wrong in business, and the worst thing you can do is actually then not talk about it or cover it up or just blatantly don't, you know, or mislead someone. I always think, you know, you have to have in these sorts of business relationships as much warning and as much honesty as possible for when things go wrong, you know, is really important. So that I think became very, very clear. And to use the line of an old boss of mine, you know, that the Brits, we love a bargain. We love to be able to brag about how little we've paid for something rather than how much we paid for it. And I think that is a kind of psychological challenge for us, but it is important that there's profit in it for everybody in the supply chain. Right, Joe, are we okay to? We've got 3 questions on here, I think.
We have a few minutes. So the first question is, what is your best advice for a completely new small winery vineyard to get a place on a local independent retail off-license shelf?
Oh, we have the perfect person. Ruben.
Talk to them is the simple answer. Go in there and see what they want. I mean, it sounds strange, but to go back to the rosé I talked about earlier, before that was actually even made, the owner of the vineyard came in and said, what rosé sells from here? What color does it need? You know, what color does it need to be? How do you package it? And we were able to have a very open conversation about, well, look, it needs to be Provençal pale, because frankly, that's what sells. And so we were talking on the right wavelength even before the product had been finished. So just talk to them. And what I would say is don't turn up cold. Do ring the store or send an email first, because the amount of this happens not just from wineries, it's account managers and everything. They turn up at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon because it's the last on their round on the way home, and you've got the evening commuter set just about to arrive, and the last thing you want to do is stop and talk for half an hour with somebody who you haven't prepared to talk about. So basically communicate with them, ring them, email them, whatever. You may get an abrupt short, we're not interested, but at least that you know that's a definitive no. But you'll probably get, come in, have a chat, have a coffee, we'll shoot the breeze, and we'll try and work out something that may or may not suit us.
Yeah. Also, the other thing I would venture is that they need to be able to work out how much they need to sell to you for. Yes. So you've got that information already.
Absolutely.
Okay. Right. So next one then, Jo.
It is. I think you part answered this already, but what do you think about prospecting for new customers on trade, off trade during this difficult time of COVID, especially when they may still have stock in difficulty, etc.
I'm happy to take that, and it's a very pertinent question at the moment, because in fact, my sales team are also asking the same question. The feedback we're having at the moment rather touches on what Rupert's just said in general, but don't bowl in at the moment, because they're only allowed 2 people in their shop. The last person they want one of those 2 people to be is a salesperson or someone trying to sell them something. They want customers at the moment. So think about that. Consider online meeting. And just do some homework. But in terms of the difficulties, I think you will know the ones which are in difficulty because they won't be there. So that there will be people opening on a wing and a prayer. And our read of the situation, yes, we have had some new business in the last week or 2. But generally speaking, they do have some stock. They want to get back up and running. They don't really want to change anything. They just want to get going, and that's a sweeping statement. But so I think, yes, it is a challenge at the moment. But just think about the pressures that they're under before bowling in, and do some homework.
And is there not? I mean, there's something to be said at the moment for really being able to forge extremely strong partnerships with your customers, whether they be individuals or businesses. This is a time when the value of a strong relationship really can pay off, I think, and a bit of patience, I think, is hugely important. Yeah,
no, I agree with that 100%. Selling to restaurants is a pretty foolhardy way to make money, really, because it's a credit risk, and it is really very tough. And at the moment, restaurants are waking up to a nasty reality. Most of them owe their suppliers money and are having to negotiate how that's repaid. So that there is a strong allegiance to the suppliers at the moment, and that's right and proper. I guess that will change over time, but no, it is a very tough time for a new player to go in and try and win a new piece of business, unless they've fallen out with their current supplier. So without being doom and gloom about it, I think we have to bide our time. Things are moving very quickly. I think it will look a lot better in September than now. I think right at the moment they really don't want to consider changing meat supplier, fish supplier, wine supplier, whatever. It's just about opening and dealing with the practicalities of working in these circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Okay.
We've got time for one last question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Should wineries allow for redistributors to add 35% on top of off-trade price to get recommended retail, or allow supply at 35% below trade price?
All I would do is add to my last statement on this, is that my duty paid cost price as an importer obviously includes the margin for the winery if it's coming in from anywhere else. So you've sort of got your answer there. You need to work out what you need to make as a winery, and you have a minimum or a selling price that includes your margin. And then you have to do the price calculations from there to make the rest of the market work. So actually, in effect, you need to go from your distributor's cost price upwards, not from your own. Otherwise, you'll end up probably 20% below where it should be.
Well, and also, yeah. I mean, you have to think ultimately about what the retail price at Celador is, because through the supply chain, the different costs that are associated at the different parts of that supply chain need to allow profit for everybody to be able to hit that same price. But you're establishing a market price, you know, a known value and from Celador. That's kind of where it all comes from. But Joe, I'm just wondering if anybody does want to elucidate any of this, then I'm more than happy for people to get in touch with me afterwards if that's helpful.
Yeah,
absolutely brilliant. Yes.
If there's time, the final thing I'd say on pricing is don't overly link on-trade and off-trade. You know, you need to get the off-trade pricing matrix right, and you need to get the on-trade pricing matrix right, but there shouldn't be a formulaic link between the two, because they're different markets. So you know, if I'm selling to a retailer, give or take, I'm looking to make 21%. To a restaurant, I'm looking to make 25, 26%, because of the added services that we offer on the restaurant side. So we end up with the same contribution, but actually it's more efficient working with a retailer ordering in relatively large quantities than it is, you know, bottle picking and doing a lot of training and all the other stuff that the restaurants need. Good.
Great. Okay. So listen, I know, Joe, you're going to top and tail us now and kick us off. But let me say thank you to Andrew and Rupert. It's really good. I hope it's been useful and interesting for the audience. There is another session next week, different to me again, I'm afraid, but with two others, which is, I think, is all flagged on the website, isn't it, Joe? So, but from me, thank you guys for your input. It's been really good.
Thank you.
And I would just like to say thank you also to the three of you, and echo what Simon has just said, that there's another session next week. And thank you for everyone who participated as well. Is anybody going to say anything else? And otherwise I'll end this webinar.
No, that's good. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you all. Thank all of you. It's been absolutely fascinating and really rather honest and frank. So thank you very much indeed.
Good.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.